For most of Western intellectual history, philosophy has been dominated by what we can call a metaphysics of substance. This way of thinking, rooted in ancient philosophers like Parmenides, Plato, and Aristotle, and later reinforced by Descartes and Newtonian physics, assumes that the basic building blocks of reality are static, enduring, and self identical things. In this classical view, substances come first. They have properties and take up space, and they may undergo changes, but their core identity remains the same through time. Change, movement, and time are treated as secondary. They are just accidents or modifications happening to an underlying substance. Process philosophy completely turns this hierarchy upside down. It says that becoming is more fundamental than being. Reality is not a collection of static things that occasionally change. Reality is change, activity, and flow. What we see as permanent, solid things are actually stable patterns or waves within a dynamic, interconnected cosmic stream. The ancient Greek philosopher Heraclitus said it best: everything flows. You cannot step into the same river twice because both the river and you are constantly changing. In the 20th century, this ancient intuition was turned into a rigorous philosophical system by Whitehead. In his great work, Process and Reality, Whitehead developed a comprehensive philosophy designed to align metaphysical thinking with the revolutionary discoveries of modern science, including quantum mechanics and Einstein's relativity. These discoveries shattered the old Newtonian view of passive matter moving through absolute space and time. To understand why process philosophy structures the world the way it does, we must first examine the two major intellectual errors that Whitehead accused traditional philosophy and science of committing. These are the fallacy of misplaced concreteness and the bifurcation of nature. The fallacy of misplaced concreteness happens when we mistake an abstract concept, mathematical model, or high level generalization for concrete physical reality. For centuries, Newtonian physics modeled the universe as an array of independent material particles with simple location. This meant that a particle could be definitively said to exist here in space and now in time, completely independent of what was happening anywhere else. Whitehead pointed out that matter with symbol location is a highly useful mathematical abstraction for calculating mechanical trajectories, but it is not how the universe actually is. When we mistake this abstraction for concrete reality, we find ourselves stuck in a dead end materialism that cannot explain life, consciousness, or meaning. In concrete reality, everything is intrinsically tied to its environment. Things do not exist in isolation. The second error is bifurcation of nature. This is the radical division of the world into two separate realms: the objective world of physical matter with its primary qualities like mass and velocity, and the subjective world of human experience with its secondary qualities like color, sound, value, and meaning. Descartes famously institutionalized this split by dividing reality into extended matter on one side and thinking mind on the other. This left philosophy with an unsolvable problem. How can a mindless mechanical body interact with a bodiless conscious mind? Process philosophy completely rejects this division. It insists that nature cannot be split down the middle. Any valid philosophy must explain physical matter and conscious experience within a single unified framework. If human beings experience beauty, value, and purpose, then these qualities must be rooted in the fundamental structure of the universe itself. If the universe is not made of static substances or material atoms, what is it made of? Whitehead introduces a new vocabulary to describe a universe of pure process. The ultimate indivisible drops of experience that make up reality are called actual entities. When we want to emphasize their temporal nature, We also call them actual occasions. Whitehead writes that actual entities are the final real things of which the world is compounded. There is no going behind actual entities to find anything more real. Actual entities are not physical particles. They are atomic events or pulses of experience. They are remarkably brief, microscopic droplets of creative energy that happen, reach completion, and then perish to make room for the next event. The universe is an endless web of these pulsating flashes of experience. Even what we call an atom or an electron is not a continuous object. Rather, it is a historical sequence of actual occasions rapidly inheriting characteristics from one another. Every actual entity is inherently relational. Whitehead's principle of relativity states that the potential of an actual entity is entirely defined by its capacity to enter into the constitution of other actual entities. No entity can exist in a vacuum. To be is to be felt, experienced, and used by subsequent actual entities. Identity is entirely constituted by relationship. If the fundamental building blocks of the universe are these fleeting, microscopic pulses of experience, how do we explain the stable, enduring, macroscopic world we see around, such as rocks, trees, chairs, and human bodies? Whitehead explains this through the concepts of nexus and a society. A nexus is simply a grouping or cluster of actual entities bound together by their mutual relationships. A society is a specialized nexus that has social order. This means the entities within the nexus pass a common defining characteristic down through time from one generation to the next. A rock is a low level, uncoordinated society of actual entities. The entities pass on the characteristics of mass and structural rigidity, but there is no centralized overarching consciousness governing the rock. A living organism, like a human being, is a highly complex hierarchical society of societies, including cells, organs, and nervous systems, topped by a dominant series of actual occasions which we experience as our conscious human mind. How does a new moment of reality come into being? Whitehead outlines this through a microscopic process called concrescence. The word concrescence comes from Latin meaning growing together. It is the process by which a novel, individual, actual entity integrates the entire past history of the universe into its own distinct, unified experience. Every new moment is an act of creative synthesis. The mechanism by which an actual entity reaches out and grabs data from the world is called prehension. This word comes from Latin meaning to seize or to grasp. Whitehead deliberately coined this term to replace the word perception, which sounds too intellectual and human centered. Prehension happens at every level of the universe, from an electron reacting to a magnetic field to a poet writing a stanza. There are two primary forms of prehension. Physical prehension is the act of feeling and inheriting data from the past actual entities that came before. Conceptual prehension is the act of feeling possibilities, potentials, or abstract qualities. Prehensions can be positive or negative. A positive prehension means the entity accepts a data point from the past and incorporates it into its own being. A negative prehension means the entity actively shuts out, eliminates, or ignores a data point to prevent it from disrupting its internal harmony. This capacity to select, filter, and reject is the absolute primordial root of choice and freedom in the universe. How does an actual entity know how to organize all these prehensions? It is guided by its subjective aim, which is an internal blueprint or driving purpose toward a specific ideal realization of itself. To achieve this aim, the entity draws upon what Whitehead calls eternal objects. Eternal objects are process philosophies equivalent to Platonic forms or Aristotelian universals. They are pure potentials such as specific shade of green, a geometric form, an emotion, or a mathematical relation. Eternal objects do not exist on their own. Rather, they ingress, meaning they enter into actual entities during consequence, transforming a vague possibility into a concrete experienced reality. An actual entity continues to synthesize its prehensions until it reaches a state of total harmonious resolution called satisfaction. At the exact moment it achieves satisfaction, the entity's internal process stops. It closes its doors, freezes, and dies. But this death is not an annihilation, it is a transformation into objective immortality. The entity ceases to be a living, experiencing subject and becomes an objective superject, which is a permanent, unalterable historical fact that will be physically prehended by all future actual entities. This cyclic movement from a living subject to an objective datum for the next generation is the fundamental engine driving cosmic time forward. One of the most powerful aspects of process philosophy is its radical, elegant solution to the mind body problem. This solution is called pan experientialism, which is closely related to panpsychism. As noted earlier, traditional dualism separates mind and matter into incompatible substances, creating an unbridgeable gap. Materialist reductionism tries to solve this problem by claiming that mind does not truly exist or that it is merely an accidental illusory byproduct of mechanical brain matter. But this fails to explain how subjective conscious feelings could ever emerge out of completely dead, unfeeling atoms. Process philosophy resolves this by asserting that matter and mind are not two different things, but two inseparable dimensions of every single actual occasion. Every actual entity has a bipolar structure. On one side is the physical pole, which faces backward, receiving, absorbing, and reacting to the causal impacts of the past universe. This is what science observes externally as matter, energy, and physical force. On the other side is the mental pole, which faces forward, experiencing internal feelings, choosing what to prehend or reject, and entertaining potential futures. This is the seed of subjectivity, spontaneity, and freedom. It is important to clarify that process philosophy does not claim that rocks, chairs, or smartphones are conscious thinking beings. That would be absurd. It claims that the ultimate subatomic events that make up the rock or chair have a primitive unconscious flash of subjectivity. In a low level object like a rock, these tiny mental flashes cancel each other out due to a lack of organization, resulting in a macro object that behaves in a purely passive mechanical way. However, in a highly evolved biological organism with a complex central nervous system, these microscopic sparks of subjectivity are structured and funneled upward, culminating in the rich, vivid, self conscious awareness experienced by humans and animals. Mind and matter are thus unified. Matter is simply the external, historical view of an event, while mind is its internal, immediate experience. Because process philosophy views the human mind as an integrated organism embedded within a dynamic universe, its theory of knowledge differs greatly from classical empiricism. Philosophers like Locke, Hume, and Kant operated on the assumption that human perception consists primarily of sharp, immediate sensory data, such as patches of color and sounds, which the mind then organizes into an intellectual map of the world. Whitehead argues that this view puts the cart before the horse, and he split perception into two primary modes. The first mode is causal efficacy, which is the primordial mode of perception. This is the primitive, deeply felt bodily experience of the world's causal impact upon us. It is vague, heavy, emotional, and non intellectual. Before you consciously see a flash of light with your eyes, your entire biological body has already physically prehended and reacted to the incoming physical energy. Causal efficacy is the feeling of the past pressing itself directly into our present. It is the reason we feel an innate sense of time, memory, and physical connection to our surroundings. It is a foundational layer of perception that guarantees our connection to an objective external world. The second mode is presentational immediacy, which is the secondary mode. This is the clean, sharp sensory world of sight, sound, and spatial geometry. It is a vivid picture our brain creates when it projects colors onto shapes and maps them out in space. While highly useful for navigation, measurement, and scientific inquiry, presentational immediacy is an evolutionary abstraction. It shows us a snapshot of the world right now, masking the deep underlying causal currents that bind us to our environment. Our day to day conscious life takes place in the synthesis of these two modes, a process Whitehead calls symbolic reference. When we see a shape and instantly recognize it as a dangerous animal coming toward us, our mind has successfully synthesized the two modes. Errors, illusions, and philosophical mistakes happen when we misinterpret this symbolic reference. For example, when a materialist philosopher looks exclusively at the sharp abstractions of presentational immediacy and concludes that the universe is just a collection of disconnected colored shapes, they completely ignore the rich underlying felt reality of causal efficacy. To tie his entire cosmological system together, Whitehead formulated a set of ultimate metaphysical principles that govern his universe of pure process. At the very peak of process philosophy stands a triad of concepts: the one, the many, and creativity. Whitehead views them together in a famous formula: the many become one and are increased by one. The many refers to the infinite array of disjoint, independent actual entities that exist in the past history of the universe. The one refers to the singular, novel, unified actual entity that is being created in the immediate present moment. Creativity refers to the absolute primordial underlying drive of the universe. It is not a thing or a god, but the ultimate boundless energy of the cosmos that compels the many to constantly synthesize into a new one. Every single second, the universe gathers its entire shattered, fragmented past, which is the many, compresses and unifies it into a brand new, unique moment of present experience, which is the one, and then tosses that new moment back into the past, expanding the total size of reality by one. This is what Whitehead terms the creative advance. It is an unstoppable, irreversible march of genuine novelty and cosmic growth. To appreciate how radical this view is, we can contrast it briefly with classical philosophies. Substance metaphysics, as found in Aristotle and Descartes, sees fundamental reality as independent static substances that have changing qualities. Time is treated as an accidental measurement of change, and space is seen as a passive, empty container. Freedom versus necessity is split, with rigid determinism in physical matter and total free will isolated in the human mind. Absolute idealism, as found in Hegel, sees a single unchanging spiritual whole called the absolute. Time is ultimately an illusion, and individual freedom is subsumed into cosmic destiny. Process metaphysics, by contrast, sees fundamental reality as microscopic atomic events in a constant web of relation. Time is absolute and fundamental, being the literal creation of new facts. Space is an active, emergent matrix of relationships. Freedom is present at every tier of reality, with micro freedom existing in every entity's subjective aim. The paradigm shift of process philosophy drastically reshapes our understanding of God, religion, and environmental ethics. In traditional Western theology, God is typically modeled after an imperial Roman emperor. God is omnipotent, omniscient, completely unchanging, and wholly unaffected by the suffering or joy of creation. Whitehead found this concept both logically incoherent and morally problematic. If the universe is fundamentally a process of relational change, an unchanging, unfeeling God would be completely alienated from reality. In response, process theology introduces a bipolar concept of God. On one side is the primordial nature of God. This is the abstract, unchanging side of God that holds the infinite realm of possibilities, which are the eternal objects. It acts as the ultimate cosmic catalyst, offering to each new actual entity its unique subjective aim and ideal potential. On the other side is the consequential nature of God. This is the concrete, ever evolving side of God. As the ultimate actual entity, God prehends and absorbs every single event that occurs in the universe. When a creature suffers, God physically feels that suffering. When a creature rejoices, God absorbs that joy. God is the ultimate repository of the world, preserving every passing moment of history in everlasting objective immortality. Consequently, God in process philosophy is not an omnipotent dictator who manipulates the universe like a puppeteer. God does not possess coercive power, rather, God possesses persuasive power. God lures, woos, and invites the universe toward harmony, beauty, and love. But creation, being endowed with genuine free will, retains the freedom to accept or reject that divine invitation. This deeply relational way of thinking also makes process philosophy an excellent foundation for modern environmentalism. In a substance based materialist universe, nature is seen as a collection of dead instrumental machinery. A tree is just wood, an animal is just an automated biological machine. Both lack intrinsic value and exist merely to be exploited for human utility. In process philosophy, because every actual entity is a pulse of living experience, everything has intrinsic value. A river, an ecosystem, a forest, and a mountain are not passive blocks of matter. They are vibrant, interconnected, living webs of experience. To damage the environment is not merely to break a mechanical tool, it is to sever the vital, relational tissues of our own extended bodily identity. We do not live on the earth, we are an organic, emergent expression of the earth. Process philosophy completely re envisions our relationship to the cosmos. It rescues us from the bleak, alienating landscape of scientific materialism without forcing us to retreat into dogmatic supernaturalism or anti scientific materialism. It represents a universe that is alive, thoroughly interconnected, deeply adventurous, and shot through with genuine freedom, creativity, and purpose. We are not detached, isolated observers peering into a cold, mechanical world of dead matter. We are active, creative participants in an ongoing, magnificent cosmic symphony. Every choice we make, every emotion we feel, and every thought we think is an act of creative synthesis that alters the historical trajectory of the cosmos. By shifting our perspective from a world of static being to a dynamic universe of becoming, process philosophy restores meaning, value, and beauty to their rightful place at the very heart of reality.